From the dawn of time, humanity has searched for meaning. We looked at the stars, the storms, and the mysteries of life, and we asked the same question: is there a God? For some, that question led to faith; for others, it led to doubt. And for a few extraordinary thinkers, it became the beginning of a lifelong rebellion against the divine. Today, we explore the minds of famous philosophers who denied the existence of God, not out of hatred or arrogance, but out of a desire to understand truth beyond tradition. Their stories reveal how human reason and faith have wrestled for centuries, each claiming to hold the key to ultimate reality. Let's begin with Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher often misunderstood as the prophet of atheism. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, he wasn't celebrating or mocking religion. He was diagnosing a cultural condition. He believed that modernity, with its science, logic, and secularism, had quietly killed the idea of God in the human heart. People still went to church, but the foundation of belief had crumbled. Morality, once rooted in divine command, now floated without anchor. Nietzsche asked, if God is dead, who will give humanity meaning? He warned that without God, people would fall into nihilism, a belief that life has no purpose. His answer was bold: humanity must become its own creator, shaping values through strength, courage, and creativity. To Nietzsche, the death of God was not an end, it was a challenge, a call to build meaning without metaphysical comfort. Next, we move to David Hume, the 18th century Scottish philosopher. Hume was a skeptic, a thinker who trusted experience over faith. He questioned miracles, revelation, and even the concept of causation. For Hume, belief in God came not from logic but from habit and emotion. He wrote, "The wise man proportions his belief to the evidence." When he examined religion through that lens, he found no convincing proof. To Hume, every claim of divine intervention could be explained by human imagination or coincidence. He believed religion arose from fear of the unknown, fear of death, fear of chaos. People, he argued, created gods to make sense of nature's mysteries. Yet Hume was not cruel or hostile to believers. He simply refused to accept what could not be verified. In doing so, he planted the seeds of modern secular reasoning, the courage to say, "I don't know," instead of "God did it." Now, let's turn to Karl Marx, a thinker whose philosophy forever changed politics, economics, and society. Marx viewed religion as more than false belief. He saw it as a tool of social control. His famous line, "Religion is the opium of the people," was not just an insult, it was an observation. He argued that religion dulled human pain, giving false hope to the oppressed while keeping them passive. In his view, faith promised happiness in heaven while justifying suffering on earth. To Marx, liberation meant freeing humanity from illusions, including the illusion of the divine order. Once people stopped waiting for salvation, he believed they could create justice with their own hands. These philosophers didn't simply deny God. They redefined what it means to be human without him. Each asked a difficult question: if there is no divine lawgiver, can morality still exist? If there is no heaven, what makes life meaningful? If there is no creator, how do we explain the beauty and order of the universe? Their answers were different, sometimes contradictory, but all of them forced humanity to think beyond dogma. Bertrand Russell, Jean-Paul Sartre, and the modern critics of faith. Philosophy, at its core, is the love of wisdom, yet wisdom often begins where certainty ends. For many philosophers, that meant questioning the deepest assumption of all, that there is a divine being guiding the universe. One of the clearest and most eloquent voices of this skepticism was Bertrand Russell, a British philosopher, logician, and Nobel laureate. Russell didn't merely doubt God's existence. He sought to dismantle the arguments that had sustained belief for centuries. In his famous essay, "Why I'm Not a Christian," Russell dissected traditional proofs of God, the first cause argument, the moral argument, and the argument from design. He pointed out that saying everything must have a cause and then claiming God is the first cause was self-contradictory. If everything requires a cause, then so must God. And if God can exist without one, then perhaps the universe can too. Russell also rejected the moral argument, but claimed that morality must come from God. He believed morality arises from human empathy, social evolution, and the recognition that kindness and cooperation make life better. As he once said, no one can sit at the bedside of a dying child and still believe in a benevolent, omnipotent God. For Russell, suffering and injustice were not evidence of divine mystery. They were evidence of human responsibility. He believed humanity must take charge of its moral destiny. Reason, compassion, and courage, not faith, were the true pillars of progress. Then came Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the leading figures of existentialism. Sartre's atheism was not merely intellectual. It was existential, grounded in the lived experience of human freedom. He declared, even if God existed, it would change nothing. What he meant was profound. Even a divine being cannot define human purpose. Each person, Sartre believed, is condemned to be free, thrust into existence without meaning, and forced to create their own. Sartre rejected the idea of a cosmic plan. If God does not exist, there is no fixed human nature, no ultimate judge, and no destiny. This realization can be terrifying, but it can also be liberating. Without divine purpose, humans become the authors of their own values. Sartre wrote, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." To him, this was not despair but empowerment. Human beings must face the void, the absence of God, and still choose to love, create, and act with integrity. Beside Sartre stood Simone de Beauvoir, another existentialist and philosopher who explored the intersection of atheism, freedom, and ethics. In her masterpiece, The Ethics of Ambiguity, she argued that morality does not need a divine lawgiver. Instead, true ethics arises from our awareness of freedom, both our own and others. To live authentically, she said, is to act in ways that expand human freedom, not restrict it. For Beauvoir and Sartre, rejecting God was not rejecting goodness. It was an invitation to redefine goodness, to ground it not in divine command but in human solidarity. As the 20th century unfolded, the denial of God became less about rebellion and more about intellectual honesty. Philosophers like Albert Camus, though he refused the label atheist, argued that the universe is absurd. Camus' famous metaphor of Sisyphus pushing the boulder symbolizes humanity's struggle for purpose in a godless world. His conclusion, we must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because the struggle ends, but because he accepts it. Camus wrote, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. For him, to live without God is not to despair, it is to embrace the beauty of existence as it is fleeting and fragile. From Nietzsche's declaration of divine death to Sartre's celebration of freedom, from Hume's skepticism to Russell's logic, one theme unites them all. The search for truth must not be bound by fear. They asked questions that religion often silenced. What if morality is human, not divine? What if meaning is created, not given? What if the universe has no purpose, yet life can still be beautiful? These questions did not destroy faith, they tested it. They forced both believers and non-believers alike to confront the depths of their convictions. And perhaps that is the greatest service philosophy can offer, not to provide final answers, but to awaken deeper understanding. From Enlightenment to modern rationalism, the expanding critique of God. As the centuries passed, the world changed, science advanced, reason triumphed, and the authority of religion began to wane. But with that progress came a new challenge. Could a universe built on logic and discovery still make room for God? Philosophers of the Enlightenment believed in human reason as the torch that could dispel ignorance. Among them stood Baron d'Holbach, one of the earliest and most outspoken atheists in modern Europe. In his book The System of Nature 1770, d'Holbach declared that the universe is made only of matter and motion. He denied not only the Christian God but all forms of spiritual reality. To him, the idea of God was humanity's greatest illusion, a shadow cast by fear and superstition. He wrote, "If we go back to the origin of things, we shall find that ignorance and fear created the gods, that fancy, enthusiasm, or deceit adorn them, that weakness worships them, that credulity preserves them, and that custom, respect, and tyranny support them." D'Holbach's words were revolutionary. He was among the first to argue that the natural world needed no supernatural explanation. To believe in God, he said, was to misunderstand nature's laws. From D'Holbach, the thread of reason continued through Ludwig Feuerbach, the German philosopher whose ideas directly influenced both Marx and Nietzsche. Feuerbach's groundbreaking work, The Essence of Christianity, proposed that God is nothing more than the projection of human qualities, our desires, our ideals, our longing for perfection. He wrote, "God is the outward projection of man's inward nature." For Feuerbach, when we speak of divine love, we are really expressing our own capacity for love. When we imagine divine power, we are reflecting our own yearning for strength. He believed that religion alienates people from their true potential. By worshiping what they think is divine, they forget that the divine resides within themselves, in human reason, compassion, and creativity. Then came Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, who took this psychological view of religion even further. Freud saw belief in God as a form of wish fulfillment, the childish desire for a protective father figure, in the future of an illusion. He argued that religion is an emotional crutch that helps people cope with fear and helplessness in the face of life's dangers. He wrote, "Religion is comparable to a childhood neurosis." To Freud, faith was not evil, but immature, a stage of humanity's development that reason must eventually outgrow. In the 20th century, this tradition of skepticism met science head-on. Thinkers like Richard Dawkins, Daniel Dennett, and Sam Harris, often called the New Atheists, carried the banner of reason into public debate. They argued not just that God doesn't exist, but that belief in God hinders human progress. Dawkins, in his book The God Delusion, claimed that religion teaches people to accept blind faith instead of evidence, and to divide the world into believers and non-believers. He saw morality as a product of evolution, an outcome of empathy and cooperation, not divine command. Dennett explored religion as a natural phenomenon, something that evolved like language or culture. Harris, a neuroscientist, linked morality to the well-being of conscious creatures, arguing that we can discuss ethics scientifically without appealing to God. These modern philosophers, sometimes controversial, often provocative, reignited the ancient debate between faith and reason. They stood on the shoulders of those who came before: Hume, Nietzsche, Marx, Russell, Sartre, and others who dared to think the unthinkable. Yet their arguments raised new questions. If reason replaces faith, can it also replace hope? Can science answer not only how things are, but why they matter? And if morality is purely human, can it withstand the weight of human cruelty? In this tension between knowledge and meaning, the modern mind finds itself torn. We live in an age of unparalleled scientific understanding, yet our hearts still hunger for something beyond data, beyond atoms and equations. Even among the atheists, there is a recognition that the question of God is not merely intellectual, it is existential. It asks not only, is God real, but what does it mean to be human if he is not? This is where philosophy transcends argument and becomes reflection, where the denial of God becomes not arrogance, but contemplation. For to deny God sincerely is to still seek truth, and that, perhaps, is a form of reverence in itself. Life without God, meaning, morality, and the human condition. When a person denies God, the question does not end, it begins anew. If there is no divine lawgiver, no eternal judge, and no promised paradise, what remains? What makes life meaningful? What gives morality its weight? And what keeps humanity from despair? These are the questions that haunted the greatest minds who dared to reject the divine. They knew that removing God was not the end of philosophy. It was its greatest test. Let us return to Albert Camus, whose idea of the absurd captures the heart of the human struggle in a godless universe. Camus believed that life is inherently meaningless, not because it is empty, but because our longing for meaning meets a silent world. We ask, "Why am I here?" And the universe answers with silence. This clash between our desire for purpose and the indifference of existence is what Camus called the absurd. But Camus refused despair. In his book The Myth of Sisyphus, he described a man condemned to push a heavy boulder up a hill for eternity only to watch it roll back down each time. This, he said, is the human condition, endless effort without ultimate reward. Yet his conclusion was stunning. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. For Camus, even in the absence of God, life can be meaningful because we create our own defiance. To live is to revolt, to embrace each moment fully, to love, to act, to create even when nothing lasts. His philosophy was not nihilistic, but heroic. He said, "The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart." In that same existential spirit, Friedrich Nietzsche also sought to find meaning after the death of God. He warned that if humanity failed to create new values, we would fall into nihilism, the belief that nothing matters. To overcome this void, Nietzsche introduced the concept of the Bermensch, the overman, or the individual who transcends conventional morality and creates meaning through strength of will. He wrote, "Man is something that shall be overcome." Nietzsche's challenge was both terrifying and inspiring. He asked, if there is no God, can we become the creators of our own destiny? Can humanity stand upright, without divine crutches, and say yes to life, even with all its pain and chaos? This was not a philosophy of despair, but of courage. Nietzsche saw the denial of God not as the end of morality, but as the birth of freedom, the freedom to affirm life without illusions. Yet not all philosophers found comfort in that freedom. Fyodor Dostoevsky, though deeply Christian, offered a haunting counterpoint in his novels. Through the character Ivan Karamazov, he asked, if God does not exist, is everything permitted? It was a moral question that even the atheistic philosophers could not ignore. For thinkers like Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, the answer was no, not everything is permitted. Even without God, we are responsible for our choices. Sartre's concept of bad faith, the refusal to accept our freedom, warns against escaping into excuses or moral laziness. He believed that every decision shapes not only who we are but what humanity itself becomes. To live ethically, he said, is to act in ways that respect the freedom of others. This moral vision without God is fragile, yet profound. It rests not on eternal commandments, but on empathy and responsibility. It says, we are free, and therefore we must care. The denial of God, then, is not the celebration of chaos, it is the recognition of human dignity. It is an invitation to take ownership of life. To the existentialists, atheism was not a rejection of value, but its rebirth. If there is no divine plan, then every act of kindness, every creation, every moment of beauty becomes even more precious because it exists against the void. Love becomes sacred, not because it is commanded, but because it is chosen. As Sartre said, man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. That responsibility is the weight of a godless world, but also its glory. To live without God, for these philosophers, is not to live without meaning. It is to understand that meaning is not discovered, it is built, and every human being, believer or not, becomes a builder. The story of philosophers who argued against God's existence is not merely a tale of rebellion. It is more deeply a story of human courage, the courage to ask forbidden questions, to confront uncertainty, and to seek truth even when it shakes the foundation of comfort. Each of the thinkers we've encountered, from Democritus to Nietzsche, from Hume to Camus, contributed not to the destruction of meaning, but to the expansion of it. They reminded humanity that truth cannot be inherited, it must be discovered anew. again and again, in every generation, the death of God and the birth of human responsibility. When Nietzsche declared, "God is dead, and we have killed him," he was not celebrating atheism. He was lamenting a loss of meaning. He foresaw a civilization where science would replace faith, but where the moral and emotional depth once sustained by religion would fade into emptiness. Nietzsche's challenge was this: if God is gone, who now defines good and evil? Who gives life its purpose, its sacredness, its worth? And his answer was bold: we must become the creators of our own values. In the absence of divine authority, humanity must assume the weight of moral responsibility. This, he believed, was the true test of human greatness. It's a terrifying freedom, but also an invitation to live authentically, to face existence without illusion, and to affirm life even in the face of nothingness. Existentialists and the search for meaning. The existentialists of the 20th century, such as Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, carried Nietzsche's torch into a new age of reflection. For Sartre, the absence of God meant that there was no pre-written script for human life. We are condemned to be free, thrown into existence without guidance, and therefore utterly responsible for what we become. Camus, on the other hand, saw this as the absurd condition of man, the tension between our longing for meaning and the silence of the universe. He asked, should we then despair? And his answer was a quiet, noble no. To rebel against absurdity is to live, to love, to act, to create even when meaning is not guaranteed. In their own ways, both Sartre and Camus turned unbelief into a philosophy of integrity, living without illusion, but with dignity and compassion. The rise of secular humanism. By the mid-20th century, a new movement emerged, secular humanism, rooted in the legacy of these thinkers. It argued that morality, justice, and compassion do not require divine sanction. They arise from the human condition itself, from our capacity for empathy, reason, and shared experience. Thinkers like Bertrand Russell captured this beautifully when he wrote, "The good life is one inspired by love and guided by knowledge." For Russell, love and reason were enough. He saw the universe as indifferent, but he believed humanity could still build islands of meaning through kindness, science, and creative understanding. In this light, the philosophers who denied God's existence did not seek to destroy morality, but to anchor it more deeply in human solidarity. The modern dialogue of faith meets reason. Today, the debate continues. In classrooms, pulpits, podcasts, and YouTube videos like this one, people wrestle with the same ancient question. Is belief in God an illusion, or is disbelief a form of blindness? Modern philosophers like Charles Taylor and Alain de Botton suggest that even in a secular age, the longing for transcendence remains. Human beings, they say, are spiritual by nature. We seek meaning beyond mere survival. We hunger for beauty, love, justice, and belonging. Even among atheists, there is often a recognition that the human spirit reaches toward something larger, whether we call it truth, consciousness, or the mystery of existence itself. Thus, the debate between faith and reason is not a war. It is a dialogue stretching across centuries, inviting both sides to deepen their understanding. The philosophical legacy. What do these philosophers leave us? Not certainty, but clarity. Not answers, but better questions. They remind us that philosophy is not about destroying belief, but about examining it, refining it, and ensuring that whatever we believe is worthy of the human mind and heart. To question God is not to hate him. It is to explore the boundaries of what it means to be human, to think, to doubt, to hope, and to create meaning in the vast mystery of existence. In this way, even the atheist philosopher participates in the sacred work of seeking truth. Perhaps the most honest stance is not to declare that God exists or does not, but to live as if meaning matters, to seek truth with courage and humility. As Socrates once said, the unexamined life is not worth living. Whether you believe or doubt, whether you pray or question, the very act of seeking truth is a form of reverence. So, the story ends not with denial, but with dialogue. between faith and reason, between heaven and the human mind, between the known and the infinite. And that, perhaps, is where philosophy finds its truest calling, not in proving or disproving God, but in awakening the human spirit to the mystery of being itself. In every question about God, there echoes a deeper question about ourselves. And that, dear listener, is where the journey of philosophy truly begins. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel.